Hey, this is Jono, and today I'm going to give a very short presentation on enteric viruses. Enteric viruses, what are they? Well, viruses in general are very complex molecular structures. If you look at this picture, this cartoon over here of that is based on the molecular structure of a rotavirus, you can see that there's these complex features all over it. But basically, it's just molecular proteins and layers that house genetic material on the inside, which you can see here in this picture. And essentially what they do is they hijack a cell and introduce their own genetic material into that cell, and then that tells the cell to make more of the virus. And then those viruses go on and infect more cells, and the cycle just exponentially increases and repeats. Examples of these are wide-ranging. This one over here, this one's specifically a rotavirus. There's also what's called norovirus, and there's much more types of viruses that are these enteric viruses. But basically, most of them cause gastrointestinal distress. If you ever hear about somebody talking about getting a stomach flu, usually they're talking about getting a norovirus. It's a highly infectious and sticky virus that can stick to surfaces. And they cause nausea and diarrhea, and so that leads to problems such as malnourishment and dehydration, because any food that you're taking in, you immediately flush out of your body using lots of water. So treatment is typically supportive. If you go to the hospital or something, they're going to give you an IV that helps you stay hydrated, and they're going to try to like increase your nutrients and stable and keep you stable. But most people get fine on their own. The symptoms typically last anywhere from 2 days to 2 weeks, just depending on the virus. Also, hepatitis A is also an enteric virus. That one infects the liver, so not all of these viruses are just gastrointestinal viruses. They also can do other things. But hepatitis A is one worth mentioning. It causes fatigue, nausea, stomach pain, and jaundice. Like I said, it infects the liver. This is a vaccine-preventable disease, and it's also typically non-fatal, but it can make you pretty sick. I believe it's one we have to have a vaccine for to even go to school. So what are the sources of these? Well, typically it comes from humans, which makes a lot of sense, but it can also come from animals. In drinking water, one of the largest sources is typically sewage, which makes sense, untreated sewage, of course. But because drinking water is typically treated to keep us from getting sick, when people do get sick, it's usually from coming into contact with a surface that had the virus on it, and then they get the virus in their mouths, which sounds pretty gross because it is from fecal matter. But it doesn't mean that you have to eat poop to get it. Like you can still get it from even just getting a microscopic amount on your hand. Like maybe you've gone to the bathroom and touched a doorknob or touched a counter that someone who was sick touched. And they don't even have to be symptomatic to pass it. They can be asymptomatic and still pass it either before they show symptoms or even well after they show symptoms. They can still shed the virus. But anyway, so that's why it's important to wash your hands and disinfect surfaces. But when it does come to drinking water, the EPA regulations, and this is why it's less common to get sick from it from drinking water, the EPA regulations mandate that there is none of these enteric viruses in the drinking water. So drinking water that comes from surface water or any groundwater that's influenced by surface water must be disinfected. Usually that's by a chemical means, typically by chlorination. You may have heard of water being treated with chloramine. That's really common. And another very common way, although not as effective against viruses, is filtration. Filtration isn't as effective because viruses, again, they're molecular structures, so they're very small and hard to filter. Other ways are boiling your water or using UV, but really the most common form is through chemical means by chlorination. Anyway, that's my presentation. Thanks for listening. I hope you enjoyed it, and I hope you learned something. Thanks.